All right, Attorney General Barr's letter to Congress gives us a little bit more insight into the Mueller investigation. So now let's bring in Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz to help us break it down. Professor, great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm probably going to be the only person on your show who is going to be very critical of Mueller. I thought it was a cop-out for him to say that there was not enough evidence to indict, but it's not an exoneration.
On obstruction.
And we're going to put a report out on obstruction. We're going to put a report out which says on the one hand, on the other hand. It sounds like a law school exam. That's not the job of the prosecutor. The job of the prosecutor is to decide yes or no. Make a decision. And then if you say yes, you indict. If you say no, you shut up. You don't go on and say, no, we're not going to indict, but let me tell you all the evidence that might have led us to indict. That's exactly what prosecutors shouldn't do. That's exactly what Comey did. How is this different than Comey? Comey says, I'm not going to indict Hillary Clinton, but let me tell you, it was a close case. She had all of this stuff, and she was extremely careless, and she did terrible things, but we're not going to indict her. That's not what prosecutors do. So I challenge defenders of defenders of Mueller to distinguish what Mueller did in relation to obstruction of justice to what Comey did in relation to her email and why she wasn't indicted on that. I don't see a big difference.
Yeah, it's interesting because we knew as soon as we saw this in the letter where the special counsel said, I'm not exonerating, I'm not also convicting or indicting the president or suggesting he committed a crime on this issue of obstruction of justice. So then he left it to the attorney general, who then with the legal team and with Rod Rosenstein and with others came to the conclusion that they did not see a factual basis for finding the president had obstructed justice. Interesting that Barr said it wasn't completely premised upon the point that they didn't find an underlying crime of any kind of collusion or any kind of trouble with Russia,
right,
but that did bear on the decision. He also said it wasn't about the constitutional question of whether or not you can indict a sitting president, but he said we looked at it and we thought that it was not worth pursuing. Now, Congressman Jerry Nadler, the chair of the House Judiciary, has tweeted quite a bit about this, and of course we knew that would be the point Democrats would jump to. He says, Special Counsel Mueller worked for 22 months to determine the extent to which President Trump obstructed justice. Attorney General Barr took 2 days to tell the American people that while the president's not exonerated, there will be no action by DOJ. I would argue the letter goes farther than that because it says we didn't find that he actually committed acts that were obstruction of justice. What do you make now of this back and forth that we're going to have over that point?
Well, that's exactly what happened with Hillary Clinton. When Comey said not enough evidence to indict, but she was careless, every Republican seized on that. What Nadler said is exactly why the Mueller report shouldn't have said what it said. It should have made its decision. Maybe it should send a confidential letter to the Attorney General saying, look, it was a close case. We had people arguing one way, people arguing the other way. But you don't make that public. That's not what prosecutors do. Let's remember also, prosecutorial reports are inherently one-sided. They don't hear the defense case. They don't cross-examine witnesses. There's no opportunity to hear both sides of the story. So we shouldn't take all that seriously. Any conclusion that is negative about anybody that doesn't result in an indictment. If there's an indictment, at least you have a chance to challenge it and fight back in court. But if they say, oh, you were a bad boy, you almost obstructed justice, how do you fight against that? Where do you defend yourself against that kind of charge? That's why traditionally prosecutors are not allowed to say anything about people they decided not to indict. But Mueller just couldn't resist. He's been working all these months, spent all this money, so he has to tell the American public, look, I had some people who wanted to indict, some people who didn't want to indict. Here's this argument, here's that argument. I'm leaving it to the Attorney General. Democrats will take one thing out of it, Republicans will take another thing out of it. That's precisely what prosecutors should not do. Shame on Mueller for not having the guts to come to a decision one way or the other. That's what prosecutors are paid to do.
Okay, so obviously he as special counsel was operating under a different statutory framework than Kenneth Starr, who was then working as the independent counsel. Now, he today was asked about this issue as you talk about the parallels between then FBI Director Comey and Hillary Clinton and her emails. Here's what Ken Starr said about doubling back on that issue.
There really needs to be a full airing of all this. I'm not saying criminal charges need to be brought. I'm not saying lock her up. I'm saying let's get to the bottom of all this, because I don't think we did.
You know, Professor, he talked about the fact that there were a lot of people who were involved on that end with Hillary Clinton and then with the investigation into President Trump who thought she was going to be the president, and many of them probably never thought their texts would be exposed. They would have to answer questions. Any chance you think there's a revisiting of the charges or the allegations against her?
Absolutely not. No, and we should stop weaponizing the criminal justice system. If you don't like Hillary Clinton, you voted against her. She lost the election. I think the idea of reopening a case now would just politicize our criminal justice system even more. I think the Mueller report does a good job of depoliticizing, at least on the collusion, conspiracy, Russian interference, but I think it did an abysmal job on the issue of obstruction of justice. We, the American public, are entitled to a yes or no decision, not some law school essay on what arguments there are on both sides of this issue. That was a serious mistake.
Yeah, I do have, as you say, that flashbacks to law school exams where you do try to cover every potential avenue, cover your bases and cover both sides, multiple sides, just to make sure that you get some credit for your answer in some way. It's much different when you're a special counsel. The letter also does make this reference to other ongoing legal matters. I mean, there are other things that the president, people close to him within his atmosphere, are going to have to think about. It says, separately, I also must identify any information that could impact other ongoing matters, including those that the special counsel has referred to other offices. That's in Barr's letter. I mean, he definitely makes reference to the fact that the president and his legal team still have a lot of things on their plate, Professor.
Oh, sure, but I think the reason he said that was to explain why he might not produce everything in the report, because they might be relevant to ongoing investigations. He had to say that, and we all know that there are investigations by the Southern District. But it's important that we did learn there are no sealed indictments, that there's no recommendation in the report for any further indictments, and so this is not what many people feared, just shifting it over to the Southern District and saying, we're not going to indict this guy, but maybe you should. That was done with the Attorney General as far as the obstruction of justice, but he didn't do it with the Southern District. So, look, this is a good day for the president. It's a very, very bad day for CNN. I have to tell you, there should be hanging their head in shame when you think about how many people went out on a limb and predicted there would be indictments for obstruction, there would be indictments for collusion, there would be indictments for this and for that. They made it seem like it was an open and shut case, and they misinformed the American public. And they have to have some public accountability when you say things that turn out not to be true. Look, I've been vindicated. I've been saying this from day one and been criticized and condemned for simply doing a legal analysis that I think any reasonable, objective, nonpartisan lawyer would have done, would have come to the same conclusion I came to, and essentially the conclusion that was come to today by the Attorney General.
All right, Professor Alan Dershowitz, always great to have your insights. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
The Democrats actually are becoming a far-left party. I mean, they're becoming a radical party. You look at what they want to do with the Supreme Court. You look at what they want to do with the voting age. Where did that come all of a sudden? The voting age at 16. They're becoming radical. They are radicalized. You look at this Green New Deal. It's the most preposterous thing. Now, I don't want to knock it too much right now because I really hope they keep going forward with it, you know, frankly, because I think it's going to be very easy to beat.
President Trump in a new interview, an exclusive interview with Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo, sounding pretty confident in his 2020 odds because of the Democrats' drift to the far left. Joining me now is Democrat strategist David Morey and American Majority founder and CEO Ned Ryan. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here on this Friday night, a historic Friday night, about which we'll talk more in just a moment. But David, when you hear the litany of these radical programs coming out from Democrats, the Green Deal, the packing of the Supreme Court, having a voting age of 16, do you get a little nervous that the president might be right?
Well, I think the president is favored to be reelected, David, if we had to look at it tonight. But I think you're citing, you know, the pace car for the Democratic Party, AOC, versus the center of gravity. Wait till Biden gets in the race. You know, you're going to have a lot more, you know, by the time you get to a general election, let's see where the party is. They're taking some initiatives. And don't forget, Donald Trump has overserved his base more than any president in history. He's very good at creating a kind of reaction on the part of his opponents. And that's in some ways what you're seeing during this kind of messy primary season on the Democratic side.
But, Ned, you even have Democrat, formerly middle-of-the-road, what used to be called middle-of-the-road Democrats, like Ed Rendell. Used to be governor of Pennsylvania. He was mayor of Philadelphia. He was a bigwig in the Democrat Party. He is very nervous right now. He said he thought we had a slam dunk until the leftward drift began, going further and further and further. Now he's very worried.
Well, he should be, because I think the real power inside the Democratic Party lies with the progressive left, with the hard left, with the small dollar donors, with the grassroots activists. I'm convinced, David, that the nominee for the Democrats in 2020 will have to swear allegiance to all of these crazy ideas: the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, free college, universal basic income. You know, you were talking about AIPAC earlier. I think they're going to have to swear allegiance to the boycott, divestment, sanction movement against Israel. They're going to have to swear to all of these to actually win the nomination. And then the amazing part is, about 90 days after they've won that nomination, somehow try to pivot to the middle and try to convince Americans that they're somehow centrist, when in fact they've sworn allegiance to all these far-left socialist ideas. I think they're in a lot more trouble than they want to admit right now. And I think Donald Trump is very well positioned with the substance of his policy, whether it's the economy, all the other things that he's working on. Again, he has delivered to his base a lot of these things, like judges. So I think he's coming into the 2020 election looking very, very good.
And then you have the news today. The Mueller probe in the hands of William Barr, 22 months long, 34 people were indicted, but Democrats don't seem to like that they're going to the left if they don't hear what they want to hear. I mean, the point is that the Trump collusion charge apparently was not produced. It was not produced in congressional investigations. Apparently, it hasn't been produced by the Mueller investigation. So, David, if in fact that turns out to be so, from the reports that we're getting, do Democrats continue with these investigations that are likely to go nowhere in terms of collusion?
Look, I think that we're at an historic crossroads. I think we need 100% transparency. We don't actually know what's in the report so far, so let's hold our breath there. The Democrats will continue with investigations if the Mueller report aims them in those directions. In some ways, you know, I sort of suspect that that President Trump will not be accused or culpable of collusion in this report, but I suspect both sides will find things in the report that are not comfortable for each. So this thing's going to keep going. And remember, there's 100% certainty the Russians meddled in the election. They're probably going to try again. And there's an awful lot of indictments around the president that show there's a lot of smoke there. So let's see what the Mueller report says first.
Well, and in fact, Ned, I think the Russians have tried to interfere in every election in my lifetime, and I'm not a young guy anymore. But the point is that there was no collusion. No charge of collusion has ever been proven, and it appears from what we know now that the Mueller report is going to say as much. So where do the Democrats go from here, and where do the Republicans go in terms of using this as a campaign issue?
Well, first of all, I would say it's very hard to turn a fairy tale into facts, and that's what this Russian collusion thing has been. It's been a fairy tale. There never was, there isn't, and there never will be, because, again, you can't make a fairy tale into facts. I think what's going to happen is that the left is, this is all about them still being unable to come to grips with the election results of 2016, David. This is a massive political tantrum. And the whole thing that they are wanting to do is basically nullify the 2016 elections. The punishment is the process, and they're going to continue to do investigations as long as they can leading into the 2020 elections to punish Trump for winning an election they think he shouldn't have won. Republicans need to actually dig on this. And I will say this, David, after listening to this collusion hoax and fairy tale for 2 years and going up against people on all different sorts of channels, I am not willing to let them off the hook for essentially trying to destabilize our democracy by pushing a conspiracy theory. So I think there's going to be a lot of consequences, and I hope there are, for people in the media, on the left, in the Democratic Party, who have been pushing this with the intent of damaging the duly elected President of the United States.
Breaking news tonight, the delivery of the special counsel Robert Mueller's report to the Attorney General. We want to get some perspective from some of the very best legal minds in the country. There is no one that we would rather have with us tonight than Victoria Tinsing, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of the Justice Department, Joe DeGenova, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, founding partners of DeGenova and Tinsing Law Firm. First, I just want to say to both of you, this is, has been a 2-year process. I began the broadcast by saying the long national nightmare is over. Perhaps I should say all but over. Victoria, your reactions on the report and what we do know, for example, that there will be no further indictments, and that the indictments themselves that did take place, the vast majority of them were of Russians.
Well, I'm looking at Chucky Shifty Schumer and how the Democrats are now going into another direction. He came out, and this is what the Democrats do. and sets a bar that he knows that cannot be met. And as you discussed earlier, there are categories of information that if they are in that report cannot be revealed. One of them is classified, another is grand jury 6E, another you mentioned was people who were not indicted. They can't be discussed. But here's the important one, Lou, and that's executive privilege information. The White House gave up all the documents, didn't fight it, anything on privilege. And now Rudy and Jay must be allowed to review that report and make sure there's no executive privilege information. And Shifty Chucky knows that, but that's why he's putting out the bar. It should just be turned over immediately. The lawyers in the White House should not be able to see it. He knows what he's setting up.
The two specific issues that I think we could certainly use some clarification on. One is the presence of some sealed indictments in federal court that may pertain to the case, but it's unclear to me certainly exactly what the likelihood is that they pertain in any meaningful way. Your assessment of that, Victoria?
Well, we don't. This is just Thought Police by ABC News, who puts out the story. Well, there's a lot of sealed indictments in the District of Columbia. Maybe some of them are connected to Mueller's investigation. It was I thought it was bad journalism.
And Joe, the other issue, of course, is what are we to make of the fact there will be no further indictments?
Well, this ball game is over. Grand slam, home run for the president. The bottom line is Mueller would have never delivered the report if there are other indictments, which of course there aren't, sealed or unsealed. The fascinating thing to me was to read the letter that Attorney General Bill Barr sent to Capitol Hill. It was a slap in the face to Schiff and Schumer and Pelosi. I got the report. There's nothing in it, basically, is what he said. He said, and the most important thing was, he says, it requires me to tell you whether or not the department refused to allow any indictments. There were no such instances, he said. In fact, the fact that the report, he said he could brief them as early as this weekend on the contents of the report leads me to believe that they are popping champagne at the White House. Of course, they're going to get a chance to see it before it's sent to the Hill, and they should, for the reasons that Victoria said about executive privilege and classified information and other things. But this is a great day for the president. He beat them. He beat them all, and Schumer is going to continue to pound. And if Schumer and Schiff and Pelosi continue to do this, they're going to lose the House.
Yeah, it's interesting, and to see Schumer, as I pointed out earlier in the broadcast, he was about as hangdog as I've ever seen the man. Obviously, somewhat despondent about what he perceives, at least, to be the contents of the special counsel report. I'd like to share with the audience the letter from Attorney General Barr to the chairs of Judiciary in both the House and Senate and ranking members. The last graph in particular, in which he wrote, finally, the special counsel regulations provide that the Attorney General may determine that public release of this notification would be in the public interest. I have so determined, and I will disclose this letter to the public after delivering it to you. Going beyond the letter, as you mentioned, Joe, Victoria, this sounds like the Attorney General, listening to the President, call for transparency means to be as transparent as possible.
Oh, of course he will. And it was wise of the President to say, I want transparency. But he doesn't. I am sure Rudy and Jay are saying, but not executive privilege stuff, sir. Right.
And classified, and as you say.
The other.
Joe, if you feel like speculating, what do you think are the next steps here? I would just like to get a sense of, in the judicial process, does the president get a ringing endorsement from this? I know it's inferred. I know that we can speculate about it. But to what degree will this president be able to, salute and say, as I said, it was a witch hunt and there was never any collusion?
100% be able to say it. And here's the thing. Bill Barr, we now have a real attorney general. This is what one looks like.
Yep.
Bill Barr will impanel a federal grand jury to investigate the leaks, the unmaskings, the leaks of classified information from the National Security to National Security Council to smear people, the illegal FISA warrants, the violation of the civil rights by people in the DOJ, the Obama DOJ and FBI who were acting under color of law. Remember that phrase. Those people, all those senior law enforcement people were acting under color of law. Sally Yates, John Carlin, the head of the National Security Division,
right.
McCabe, Strzok, Comey, they all acted under color of law. So did Brennan. There's going to be a federal grand jury to look into all of this. The president can sit back and watch real criminals be investigated.
And one thing, Lou, what Tom Fitton was talking about, the president will now be free without his lawyer saying, oh, my God, they might accuse you of a crime if you release all of that classified information. He will now be free to do so. So it will loosen that vice.
Get the FISA stuff out now.
And Victoria and Joe, thank you both for being here on this historic evening.
Thank you, Lou.
It's remarkable, and we're deeply grateful to you for, as always, your analysis and perspective on matters this big in history and law. Thanks so much.